My son Daniel died 3 years ago, or at least I thought he did. Since then, the nights in this house have become long, heavy, impossible to get through without thinking of him. His laughter still floats between the walls. His scent lingers in the hallway, and even today, when the wind blows from the patio, I swear I can hear his voice calling for his mother. But the thing that torments me most isn't the memories. It's what my wife Emily has done every night since he left. At 11 o'clock sharp, without fail, she gets up from the sofa, turns off the TV, and walks to Daniel's room. She opens the door, goes inside, and locks it from the inside. Sometimes I hear footsteps, murmurs, even a softly hummed melody, the same one she used to sing to him when he was a child. And I just stand in the hallway, staring at that closed door as if the ghost of our son still lives behind it. For a long time, I thought it was her way of dealing with the grief, that she needed to feel him close, even if only in her imagination. But lately, something has changed. One night, passing by the room, I heard something that made my blood run cold. A man's voice. It wasn't a sob or an echo. It was a voice responding. I froze, my heart pounding, but I didn't dare knock on the door. That night, Emily came out of the room 2 hours later, pale, trembling, with swollen eyes. When she saw me in the hall, she forced a smile. "You can't understand this, David," she told me. "Let me grieve in my own way." And she went to sleep. Since then, I can't close my eyes without thinking about that voice. It was Daniel's voice. I swear on my life it wasn't a memory. It was real. During the day, Emily acts with an unsettling normality. She makes coffee, waters the plants, puts on a little makeup to go buy bread, as if the world is just moving along without any cracks. But there are details that won't leave me alone. The other day she washed clothes I didn't recognize. T-shirts that weren't mine, men's pants, a jacket Daniel used to wear in the winter. I also noticed she was cooking more food than necessary. "I don't like to waste food," she said when I asked. "Sometimes I just make too much." But that explanation didn't fit. There were 3 plates set, always 3. Sometimes I see her walk by with a tray in her hands, heading straight for Daniel's room, always with the same routine. She goes in, locks the door, and doesn't come back until the early morning. I've tried to talk to her, but every time I do, she breaks down. "Why do you insist on opening old wounds, David?" she says, with tears in her eyes. "Why can't you just let me remember him the way I need to?" And I stay quiet because her pain paralyzes me. But deep down, something tells me this isn't about memory or nostalgia. There's something else. Something she isn't telling me. Last week I dreamed about Daniel. He was in his room, sitting on the bed, looking at me with those eyes full of life he had as a child. He said to me, "Dad, don't let Mom lock me in. I'm not where you think I am." I woke up soaked in sweat. I don't believe in visions, but that dream left me with an anxiety I couldn't ignore. So the next day, I waited for Emily to go to the market, and I went into Daniel's room for the first time in 3 years. The musty smell hit me. Nothing had changed. The bed was perfectly made, his soccer trophies lined up on the shelf, the photos with his smile intact. But on the floor, next to the window, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Fresh, muddy footprints. They weren't old. They were recent. I followed the trail to the closet. There, among the stored clothes, I found a box with things I didn't remember. Medicine, a new toothbrush, a half-empty bottle of water. Everything indicated that someone was using this room. I felt an indescribable vertigo. If Daniel was dead, who was sleeping in his bed? And if he wasn't, what was Emily hiding? But before we continue, I'd like to know if you've subscribed to William's Revenge Stories, and if you like the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. Now, let's continue. That same night, I pretended to go to sleep early. I heard the sound of the keys, the creak of the floor, the squeak of Daniel's bedroom door opening. I waited a few minutes and went silently into the hall. The door was, as always, locked. I knelt and put my ear to it. I heard murmurs. First, Emily's voice, trembling, almost begging, "You can't stay here. It's dangerous." And then another voice, a low, familiar, male voice. "Don't worry, Mom. He doesn't know anything." I recoiled, my heart hammering in my chest. He doesn't know anything. They were talking about me. I ran to the living room, shaking, trying to convince myself it couldn't be, that my mind was playing tricks on me, that maybe my own grief was making me hear what I wanted to hear. But the fear didn't go away. That voice wasn't a memory. It wasn't an echo. It was real. I didn't sleep that night. At dawn, I made a decision. I would install a hidden camera in Daniel's room. I couldn't take any more secrets. I needed to know the truth, even if it destroyed me. When Emily left the next day, I went into the room with a small camera I had bought a while ago. I placed it behind a ceramic figure on the shelf, connected to my phone. Then I left, closed the door carefully, and waited. That night, as always, Emily went back into the room at 11 sharp. From the living room, I watched the live feed with my heart in my throat. First, I saw her light a candle in front of Daniel's photo. Then she placed a tray of food on the table. So far, nothing out of the ordinary. But a few seconds later, she turned toward the door, and someone else entered the room. The camera shook slightly, but I managed to see his face. Pale, gaunt, but unmistakable. It was Daniel, my son, the one I buried 3 years ago. The tray fell from my hands, and that night I understood that the dead had never left. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on the sofa with the phone in my hand, watching the recording over and over. The face that appeared on the screen wasn't a ghost or an illusion. It was Daniel. His hair was a bit longer, his skin pale, his movements slow, but his face was identical. The video lasted barely 2 minutes. In it, Emily served him food, stroked his hair, and whispered something the microphone couldn't quite pick up. Then Daniel turned toward the camera, as if he knew he was being watched. He barely smiled, and the image turned blurry. When the video cut out, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it would kill me right there. I sat trembling in the darkness, waiting to hear footsteps, breathing, anything. But the house remained in absolute silence. Only the clock marked the passing of seconds, slow and cruel. At 3 in the morning, Emily came out of the room. I watched her from the hallway without moving. Her hair was disheveled, her face damp with tears, and her hands were stained with something dark. Mud? Blood? I couldn't tell. When she saw me, she stopped. For an instant, I thought she would scream, but instead she smiled weakly and whispered, "David, please don't ask." And she continued on to the bedroom. The next morning, I tried to talk to her. I found her in the kitchen making coffee, her gaze lost. "Emily, we need to talk," I said. "There's nothing to say," she replied without looking at me. "I saw him. I have proof." She dropped the spoon on the table, her hand trembling. "What did you see?" "Daniel," I said. "Last night." She turned slowly. Her eyes were empty, as if my voice was reaching her from far away. "You don't know what you're saying," she murmured. "I recorded it," I insisted. "It's on my phone." She approached, slowly, and snatched the phone from my hands. She checked it quickly, but the video was gone. The file had disappeared. "What did you do?" I shouted. "I didn't touch it," she said, frightened. "I swear, David, I didn't touch it. Don't lie to me." I slammed my fist on the table. I saw our son with my own eyes. Then her expression changed. She covered her face with her hands and began to cry, silently, with a deep tremor. "You don't understand," she whispered through her sobs. I've seen him too. What? He comes to see me every night since he died. Her voice broke, and a part of me wanted to believe she was crazy, that the grief had consumed her. But another part, a darker, more honest part, knew she was telling the truth. I tried to stay calm. Emily, explain to me what is happening. She shook her head. I can't. Not yet. What do you mean you can't? He's our son. No, she said, staring at me. He's not our son anymore. Those words cut through me like a knife. What does that mean? She didn't answer. She just dried her tears. She stood up and said in a cold voice, I promised I wouldn't tell you. Promised who? I asked. Him. A chill ran down my spine. Emily looked at me with a sadness so deep it almost scared me. If you love him, she said, let him be. And she left, leaving me with 1,000 questions and an unbearable certainty. She wasn't crazy. For the rest of the day, the house felt strange. The air was heavy, the clocks ran slow, the air colder than normal. That room, Daniel's room, seemed to absorb the light. Sometimes I thought I heard the slight creak of the floor or the murmur of barely audible voices behind the closed door. I tried to distract myself by fixing things in the garage workshop, but my mind kept returning to the same place, my son's room. At nightfall, Emily disappeared. I looked for her all over the house, but she wasn't there. Her car was still in the garage, so I assumed she had to be in Daniel's room. I approached stealthily. The door was locked. I pressed my ear against the wood. I heard a whisper. First her voice, soft, motherly, and then the same male voice I already knew. But this time, the words were clear. Don't worry, Mom. Dad doesn't suspect. I took a step back, my heart on the verge of collapse. I put my hand to my mouth to keep from screaming. Doesn't suspect? What were they talking about? Suddenly, I heard footsteps inside the room. I moved away from the hall and hid behind the wall. The door opened. Emily came out, looking both ways, and locked the door. She put the keys in her pocket and walked toward the kitchen. I seized the moment. I went to the room, inserted an old lockpick I had from the workshop, and opened the lock with trembling hands. I pushed the door open slowly. The air was ice cold. It smelled like dampness and something else, a sour, metallic smell. I turned on the light. The bed was made. Nothing out of place. Only one thing caught my attention. An open window that led to the backyard. Below the sill, fresh, muddy tracks. I ran outside, but the yard was empty. The wind moved the branches of the rose bush, and the moon reflected on the glass. No one was there. I went back inside, bewildered. Emily was waiting for me in the hallway with an unsettling calm. What were you doing? She asked. Looking for you. I told you not to go in there. I tried to answer, but her gaze froze me. It wasn't my wife's gaze. It was different, empty, distant, as if something or someone was controlling her. He doesn't want to see you, David, she finally said. Who? Daniel. And she left, leaving me alone in front of that door that seemed to hide hell itself. That night, I checked the hallway cameras. The recording clearly showed Emily entering and leaving the room. But at the moment Daniel should have appeared, the image completely distorted. The signal dropped. It was as if someone knew I was watching, as if Daniel, or whatever lived in there, didn't want to be seen. And as I stared at the blank screen, I heard a sharp thud from the second floor, followed by a whisper that made my blood run cold. Dad! That voice haunted me all night. It wasn't an echo or a memory. It was clear, alive, close. Dad! When I heard it, I felt my body go completely cold, as if my blood had turned to ice. I went up the stairs in the dark, my heart pounding in my chest. The door to Daniel's room was slightly open. I pushed it slowly, not knowing what to expect. Maybe Emily, maybe an intruder. But inside, there was no one. Just the smell of dampness and that silence that seems to hide invisible breaths. The bed was still perfectly made, the desk covered in dust, the glass of water on the nightstand half full. I touched the rim of the glass. It was cold, too cold. This can't be real, I thought. But it was. Something in that room was alive. I decided I needed proof. The first camera I installed had disappeared from my phone, as if someone had deliberately erased it. So this time, I made sure to do it right. I went to the garage, got a new, more modern camera, with an independent battery and internal memory. No internet connection. No one could tamper with it. I spent all day waiting for Emily to leave the house. When she finally did, I ran upstairs and installed it behind the wall clock, directly facing the bed. I placed another one in the hallway, pointing directly at the door. I activated both. I sat in the living room and waited. The hours passed slowly. Emily returned at dusk. She prepared dinner in silence. She asked me if I wanted tea. "I'm not hungry," I said. "You didn't sleep last night?" "I couldn't. You have to stop thinking about Daniel, David. It's not good for you." I smiled bitterly. If only she knew what I knew. At 11, like every night, she got up and walked to the hallway. I followed her with my eyes from the sofa, holding my breath. She opened the door to Daniel's room. She went in and locked it. The metallic click of the bolt echoed in my head. I went to the living room where I had my laptop. The hallway camera was streaming live. Emily was inside. I waited. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. Just silence. Then a slight movement. The bedroom door opened from the inside, and a figure came out. Tall, thin, with its head bowed. I moved closer to the screen. It couldn't be. It was Daniel. The video was shaking slightly, but his silhouette was unmistakable. He was wearing the same blue jacket he wore before he died, the one we could never find the day of the funeral. He walked slowly down the hall, looking from side to side. At one point he stopped, raised his head, and looked directly at the camera. His face was partially covered by shadow, but his eyes, God, those eyes, they weren't the same. They were dark, empty, as if something inhabited them. The image distorted. A high-pitched noise filled the screen. I tried to readjust the signal, but it cut out. I don't remember how much time passed before I dared to move. When I finally got up, I went upstairs with a flashlight in my hand. The hallway was dark. The bedroom door was still closed. "Emily," I whispered. No one answered. I knocked on the door. "Emily, open up." Nothing. I looked for the keys in her purse. I knew where she kept them, and I opened the lock with trembling hands. The air that came out of the room was heavy, dense, almost unbreathable. The smell of iron was stronger than ever. I turned on the light. The bed was unmade, the tray of food thrown on the floor, and on the wall, with what looked like mud or blood, someone had written, "Don't look." I felt a knot in my throat. I didn't know whether to scream or run. I checked the whole room, every corner, every piece of furniture. No one was there, but the closet was slightly open. I swallowed hard, reached out my hand, and opened it. There were no clothes inside, just a camera. The first camera, the one that had disappeared. It was on. I picked it up carefully, took it to the desk, and checked the contents. There was only one file, dated the night before. I opened it. The video showed Emily entering the room with a tray. As always, the image was shaky, but everything seemed normal, until something changed. The figure that appeared behind her was not Daniel. Not entirely. It had his body, his voice, his way of moving, but its face seemed distorted, as if its skin didn't belong to it. Emily spoke tenderly, but the being in front of her remained motionless. Only when she tried to touch it, it pulled back. "Don't touch me, Mom. Son, I am not your son." Emily broke down crying. The being, Daniel, or whatever it was, leaned toward her, and in a deeper, thicker voice added, "He is watching me." Then it turned slowly toward the camera. Its eyes opened wide, completely black, and the screen went to static. I dropped the device on the floor. My hands were shaking, my breathing erratic. I didn't know if what I had seen was real or a hallucination. But the camera didn't lie. I ran down the stairs, looking for Emily, shouting her name. "Emily! Emily, where are you?" I found her in the kitchen, standing in front of the window, motionless. Her face was pale, her gaze fixed on the darkness outside. In her hand she held something, the tray with the uneaten dinner. "Where were you?" I asked. She didn't respond. "Emily, talk to me." She turned her head slowly. Her voice was a barely audible whisper. "You shouldn't have seen it, David. What was that? What is happening?" "We brought him back," she said, tears in her eyes. "But something went wrong." I froze. "What do you mean we brought him back?" She looked down. "You don't understand. You still don't understand." And then, with an almost imperceptible tremor in her voice, she added, "Daniel died, yes, but he didn't rest." I couldn't sleep that night. Emily's words repeated in my head over and over. We brought him back. Bring back a dead person? How, with what, and at what cost? I sat at the desk and checked the camera one more time. The last frame before the image cut out showed the bedroom wall. There, in the corner, you could see a silhouette, tall, hunched over, with something that looked like a human face, and yet it wasn't. When I zoomed in, I ran out of breath, because on the chest of that figure, a scar was clearly visible. The same scar Daniel had when we found him dead 3 years ago. I spent all morning in front of the screen. Every time I looked at that frozen frame, that hunched figure with the scar on its chest, I felt my heart grow heavier. It was Daniel. There was no doubt. But how could it be? Dawn came without me noticing. The sun filtered through the living room curtains, gilding the old furniture, the suspended dust, the silence that didn't seem to belong in a living house. Emily was asleep in the bedroom. I hadn't yet had the courage to confront her. I went to Daniel's room. The air was still cold. The clocks in the house seemed to lose time every time I entered. I'd swear that even time itself slowed down in there. On the floor, among the remains of mud and the overturned tray, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A notebook. It was Daniel's notebook. His unmistakable handwriting filled the first pages. Formulas, drawings, college notes. But halfway through, the lines changed. His hand no longer seemed to belong to him, and what was written made me shudder. "I'm back, but not all of me came back. I am not the same. Mom says I have to be quiet, but the voice in the wall won't let me sleep. It says Dad suspects. It says he will come for me soon." I closed the notebook, my hands ice cold. That was not a hallucination. It was a warning. At 9 in the morning, Emily came down to the kitchen. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen. She sat across from me in silence, as if awaiting a sentence. "How long have you known he was alive?" I asked. She didn't answer. "Emily, look at me. How long?" She finally looked up. "Since the first day," she whispered. "Since his funeral. I couldn't breathe." "What are you saying? He didn't die, David. He just stopped being the same." I put my hands to my head. "What are you talking about?" "I saw him. I saw his body. We buried him together." "What you saw wasn't Daniel," she said, tears in her eyes. "It was something he left behind." My body was shaking. "Who told you that?" "He did." Her voice cracked. "That same night, when I came back from the cemetery, he was at the door, covered in mud, wearing the same clothes we buried him in." "That's impossible." I thought I was crazy, that it was a dream. But he spoke to me, he hugged me, and his body was cold, but his heart was beating. I looked at her, unable to process what I was hearing. Why didn't you tell me? Because he didn't want me to. He was my son, and for that very reason, she said, almost shouting, because you would have tried to stop me. I was speechless. Emily stood up, walked to the window, her voice low, broken. The doctors couldn't explain it. They told me there are things science can't understand, that sometimes the soul refuses to leave. What did you do, Emily? I asked, my soul shrinking. I brought him back. But before we continue, I'd like to know if you've subscribed to William's Revenge Stories and if you liked the video. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. Now, let's continue. How? I asked, almost in a whisper. Emily turned to me, and in her eyes, there were no more tears, only guilt. There was a Dr. Anderson. He worked in an experimental clinic. He promised he could bring people back to life from irreversible states, that he could reactivate the brain with electrical impulses. And you believed him? He was my son, David. I would have believed the devil himself. I kept quiet. That last sentence chilled my soul because maybe that's exactly what she had done. The doctor came at night, she continued. He brought a briefcase with equipment, tubes, a strange machine. He told me that what was about to happen had to remain a secret, that if it went wrong, no one should ever know. And it worked? Yes. And no. She covered her face. When Daniel opened his eyes, his gaze wasn't the same. He didn't talk the same way. He didn't remember some things. Sometimes he would stare at nothing for minutes. And the doctor? He disappeared. He never came back. I stood up and hit the table. My God, Emily, you brought him back with something you don't understand. That wasn't our son. It was him, she shouted. At first it was. He slept. He ate. He breathed. But then he started to change. Her voice broke. He started to hear voices. Voices? He said someone was calling him from the mirror, that the thing that came back with him wasn't supposed to be here. Is that why you locked him up? Yes, because when he looked at himself, he smiled. But it wasn't his smile. A chill ran down my spine. Where is he now? I asked, afraid. He hides during the day. He only comes out at night. I can't control him. I looked at my wife and understood that she had lived for 3 years, sleeping with a secret that was slowly devouring her. A part of me hated her for what she had done, but another part understood. A father's love can hurt, but a mother's can become dangerous. I decided to review the recordings again. Emily let me. Maybe part of her needed me to see what she had done with my own eyes. I turned on the laptop. I opened the camera files. The first few minutes were the same. Emily and Daniel talking in low voices. The murmur of the wind. The whispers. But at the end of the video, when everything seemed normal, something happened that I hadn't noticed before. A shadow was reflected in the mirror behind Daniel. It had no human shape. It seemed to move independently of them. And suddenly, on the screen, Daniel looked up and smiled. Not at Emily, not at the camera. At me. My body tensed. I backed away from the chair, my heart racing. That smile was conscious. It knew I was watching. I turned off the laptop, but the screen lit up again on its own. The video restarted, only now the image was different. The camera was showing my own living room in real time with me sitting at the desk, and behind me, in the shadows, something was moving. I turned around slowly. The hallway was empty. The laptop emitted a hum, and on the screen a sentence appeared, written in shaky letters as if someone was typing it right at that moment. Don't look for him anymore, Dad. I'm already home. That sentence hung in the air like a cursed echo. Daniel died, yes, but he didn't rest. I didn't know what to answer. My mind was torn between terror and disbelief. Emily remained in front of me, her face bathed in tears, but with a strange serenity, almost resigned. It wasn't the look of a crazy woman. It was the look of someone who knew too much, and who was no longer afraid to bear her guilt. "Explain everything to me," I said in a hoarse voice. "Everything. Don't leave anything out." Emily took a deep breath. She sat in front of me, trembling. She took a folded envelope from her pocket, yellowed with time, and left it on the table. In the corner, a name was written, Dr. Edward Anderson. "This is where it all began," she whispered. "Years ago, when Daniel was in college, he had a lab accident. A small explosion, a sudden fire. He came out with a deep wound on his chest, that scar he always had. And since then, he started to get obsessed with the idea of the human body's residual energy. He believed the soul was a form of electricity, that it could be measured, transferred, retained. He said death wasn't final," Emily explained, "that it was just a break in the current." I heard him laugh at his own crazy ideas, never imagining he was serious. When Daniel died 3 years ago, a sudden cardiac arrest, no medical explanation, Emily refused to accept the loss. For weeks, she visited hospitals, labs, churches, until she found this Anderson, a doctor with a reputation for working between science and the divine. She contacted him in secret. He promised her the unthinkable. "I can give you your son back, but it won't be free, and he won't be completely yours." "What did he mean by that?" I asked. "You'll understand when you see this," Emily replied. From the envelope, she pulled out a sheet with a clinical seal. The letterhead read, Project Rebirth, Test 7D. There were the records of an intervention performed in a private home. Body temperature reanimated, electrical impulses applied, vital signs fluctuating, and at the bottom, a handwritten note. Subject is awake, speaks, but there is something else inside. A chill ran down my spine. "My God," I murmured. "What did you bring into this house, Emily?" She closed her eyes. "At first I thought it was Daniel. He had his voice, his memories, even his laugh. And then he started to change. The first few weeks, Daniel behaved as he did before. He ate little, slept a lot, stayed out of the light. But at night he would stay awake, talking to himself. Emily would listen from the hallway, hearing him murmur incomprehensible phrases. It's not me. He sees me. The mirror is bleeding. One night, Emily opened the door and found him in front of the mirror, his eyes completely black. I asked him what he was doing, she said. He replied, I'm learning to be Daniel again. Since then, he began to lock himself away. And she, consumed by guilt and fear, protected him, fed him, hid him, until I started to suspect. Before we continue, tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far, and what you would do in my place. Don't leave the video because what's coming next will give you goosebumps. The doctor? What happened to him? I asked. Emily looked down. He disappeared 2 days after the reanimation. And you looked for him? I didn't have time. Daniel got sick. What kind of sickness? I don't know how to explain it, she said. It wasn't physical. It was like something inside him was trying to get out. She took my hand tightly. He asked me to lock him up, to not let anyone see him. Why? Because he said if I looked at him for too long, I would remember him differently. Differently? Yes, she whispered, as he really was. In that moment, I understood everything. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't my son coming back. It was something else, using his body, his voice, his memory. Emily had brought him back, but not the Daniel we knew. She had brought back something else. Something that should not have crossed the border of death. I stood up, furious. This is an abomination. You played God. I just wanted to see him one more time, she screamed. Just one more time. Her tears were sincere, but it was too late for redemption. The door to Daniel's room creaked upstairs again, slowly, as if someone was listening. We both looked up. The silence was total. Then a dull sound, a thud against the wall. Then another, and another, as if someone was banging their head from inside. We ran upstairs. Emily tried to open the door, but it was locked. From inside his voice came, guttural, hoarse. "Don't come in. Don't look," she sobbed, pounding on the wood. "Son, please." But what came out next was not Daniel's voice. It was another, deeper, older. "There is no son anymore." A thick silence filled the house. Emily staggered back. I grabbed a lamp, ready to break down the door, but she stopped me. "No, David. If you open it, you won't be able to close it again." Her words were almost a whisper, but they were enough to stop me. The door stopped shaking. The noise ceased. Only one last murmur was heard from the other side. "Dad, tell her to let me go." And then nothing. Emily fell to her knees. I stood frozen, my soul split in two. One half wanted to save him, and the other begged for this hell to end. We didn't sleep that night. Emily stayed by the bedroom door until dawn, praying, murmuring words I didn't understand. When the sun began to filter through the windows, she looked at me with a terrifying calm. "David," she said, "if something happens, promise me you won't try to stop it." "Stop what?" "The end." And then, in an almost inaudible voice, she added, "The doctor said that if the soul doesn't accept the body, the darkness will come for everyone." I didn't see the sunrise that day. I just found myself still awake when the sun came through the window, pale and tired. Emily was asleep on the sofa, her face buried in her hands, exhausted. I couldn't look away from the door to Daniel's room. For hours, nothing had moved in there. Not a sound, not a sigh. Just a silence so heavy it seemed to be breathing. I went downstairs and poured coffee. My hands were shaking so much the liquid spilled on the table. As I drank, I remembered the doctor's words. If the soul doesn't accept the body, the darkness will come for everyone. Was that what was happening? And what if the thing inside Daniel wasn't his soul? I decided to do what I shouldn't. Look for Dr. Anderson. Not out of curiosity, but out of fear. I had to know what demon my wife had brought into my home. Finding him wasn't easy. He had disappeared from medical registries for weeks. But an old colleague of his gave me a tip. He had worked at a private research center on the outskirts of the city, shut down after a series of unexplained deaths. The place was called the Rebirth Institute. The name gave me chills. Rebirth. The same one from the documents in the envelope. I took my car at dawn and drove there. The road was long, lonely, and the arid landscape covered in dry trees seemed to reflect my own interior. I arrived at an abandoned building, with broken windows and rusty signs. A feeling of emptiness enveloped me as soon as I crossed the gate. I went inside. Dust covered everything. There were rusty gurneys, jars with dried liquids, blackboards full of illegible medical formulas. On a table, I found a folder with photographs. They were bodies, young, old, elderly, all with their eyes open, all with an indescribable expression. At the bottom of each photo, a number, 7D, Daniel Miller, my son, and below it, another, 8D, Edward Anderson. My heart skipped a beat. The doctor himself had been a patient in his experiment. I heard a noise behind me, a slow, shuffling step. I turned around, my heart in my throat. In the doorway was a man. He was wearing a dirty lab coat, white hair, sunken eyes. "You," I stammered. He smiled weakly. "So you finally came." It was Dr. Anderson. But something in his voice was wrong. He spoke slowly, as if every word hurt him. "Why did you do it?" I shouted at him. "Why did you play with my son's life?" "Because your wife asked me to," he replied calmly. "And because I wanted to prove that death was nothing more than a biological frontier." "And what did you bring back?" I asked desperately. The doctor looked down. "Not the one you loved." He was silent for a moment. Then he added, "When we opened the path, something else crossed over. A nameless consciousness. It belongs to no one, but it seeks a body to inhabit, and Daniel, he was empty just long time enough for it to enter. I was paralyzed." "Are you saying my son is possessed?" "No, Mr. Miller. Worse." His face contorted in a grimace of exhaustion. "This thing doesn't possess. It imitates. It learns. It copies. It remembers. But it doesn't feel. And can it be expelled?" The doctor shook his head. "No. Once it awakens, the original soul slowly fades. What's left is a reflection. So Daniel is dead again?" For a long time, a loud bang echoed from the lab door. We both froze. Another bang, louder. Then a voice. "Dad." That voice. That damned voice. I ran toward the exit, but the doctor stopped me. "Don't open it." "It's my son! He is not your son!" he shouted. "It's the thing that came with him." But I had already opened the door. In front of me stood Daniel. His face was paler than ever, his eyes completely black, but his voice sounded so human it hurt. "Dad, come with me. Mom needs you." I froze. "Where is your mother?" "At home, waiting for us to be a family again." "Doctor." Anderson stepped between us. "Back off, Daniel." "Don't call me that," the boy replied with a smile that chilled my blood. "Daniel is sleeping." The air became thick, heavy. The doctor took a syringe with a silver liquid from his pocket. "David, get out now." But I didn't move. Daniel looked at him and said in an almost mocking tone, "That again, doctor? It doesn't work anymore." And before I could react, he lunged at him. Anderson's scream was brief. The syringe fell to the floor, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The doctor's body twisted, and when it finally lay still, Daniel turned to me. "See, Dad?" he said calmly. "He just wanted to keep us apart." I stumbled back, tripping over a gurney. His shadow grew longer with every step. His eyes seemed to absorb the light. "What are you?" I asked him. "I am what you asked for," it replied. "The desire to see her, to have him back. It wasn't just Mom. You wanted it too." His words pierced me, because it was true. I too, in my nights of weeping, had begged to see my son one more time. I lunged for the hallway and ran without looking back. I heard his footsteps behind me, slow, steady. I managed to get out of the building and into the car. The engine roared, and when I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw him standing in the doorway, motionless, watching me leave. He didn't try to follow me. He just raised a hand, with a strange, almost sad expression, as if he knew it wasn't over yet. I drove until dawn without stopping. When I got home, I found the front door open. Emily was gone. On the table, a note written in her handwriting. "David, don't look for him. What we brought back cannot die again. I am going with him. Maybe this way he will rest." The page was stained with mud, the same mud that was on Daniel's shoes. That night I sat in front of the hallway camera. I checked the recent recordings. At 3:07 a.m. the door opened. Emily appeared, holding Daniel's hand. They crossed the threshold together, and before disappearing down the hall, they both looked at the camera and smiled. Daniel raised his hand as if waving goodbye, and his lips moved without making a sound. I zoomed in on the image. I read his words with a knot in my throat. "Your turn, Dad." When I finished watching the video, I sat still, my eyes fixed on the screen, not breathing. Emily and Daniel disappeared into the darkness of the hallway, hand in hand, like two shadows returning to the place where they belonged. The camera kept recording for a few more seconds until the image distorted. The sound became a low hum, and the screen went completely black. I closed the laptop. The silence of the house weighed on me, so much that I could hear the slow, uneven rhythm of my own heart. I didn't know if I had lost my wife forever, if Daniel still existed, or if any of us were really still alive at all. But one thing was certain. Dr. Anderson had lied. If he had also been part of Project Rebirth, it meant that what Emily had brought back was not an isolated case. There were more, and maybe some were still out there. The sunrise found me driving back to the abandoned institute. The image of Daniel holding his mother's hand wouldn't leave my mind. I needed answers, not comfort. This time I entered through the back of the building. The lab was in ruins, but the basement was still secured with a new padlock. I broke it with a crowbar and went down the stairs, flashlight in one hand and fear in the other. The air was damp and thick. The walls were covered in mold, and on the floor dozens of scattered folders showed names, dates, identification numbers. Project Rebirth. Phase 13. I started reading the reports. The first one was about a 3-5-year-old woman. Reanimation successful. Subject presents identity dissociation and total loss of pupillary reflex. The second, a 10-year-old girl. Partial awakening, incomprehensible vocalizations, definitive death after 14 hours. And the third, Daniel Miller, 7D. In the description, an underlined sentence. The mother was warned. She insisted anyway. The subject returned. The entity chose him. My legs trembled. The entity, the doctor had said. Something crossed over. Now it all made sense. I kept reading, turning the pages with frozen hands. Each record had a photograph. Deformed faces, forced smiles, empty gazes. But the worst was the last file. It had no name, just one word written by hand. Father. I heard a noise behind me. I spun the flashlight around, pointing at the door. Nothing. But when I looked back at the papers, I noticed a folder was missing, the one I had just left open in front of me. A whisper cut through the darkness. Dad. My flashlight fell. The light rolled across the floor, and in that brief flash I saw a hunched figure at the end of the hall. Tall, thin, its arms too long. And those eyes, black as the void. I ran. I scrambled up the stairs, tripping, not looking back. When I reached the main hallway, the dawn light filtered through the broken windows. For a moment I thought I had escaped, until I saw something in front of the exit. A body lying face down. I approached cautiously. It was Anderson. He was dead, his face pale, his mouth open in a silent scream. On his chest, carved with something sharp, was a sentence. Rebirth is not over. I felt sick. The lab, the reports, Daniel. It was all part of something bigger, a project that had crossed the boundaries of science and the soul. I returned home that same afternoon. Emily was still gone, but the air inside the house had changed. Colder, denser. And on the hallway wall, where Daniel's portrait used to hang, something was written in charcoal. I told you it was your turn. I felt a knot in my throat. I went up to my son's room. Everything was in order, except for a box on top of the bed. Inside was a videotape with a label, Rebirth. Final session. I looked for an old player and put it in. The image started with static. Then Anderson appeared on camera, his face tired. Record of the final experiment. The subject has shown exceptional progress. But there is a change. His consciousness no longer responds to commands. It seems to have its own will. It has communicated with the other bodies. It says they will all be out soon. This project has gone too far. The video was interrupted by a noise. The camera fell to the floor, and only a foot was seen dragging out of frame. Then, a voice. "We are no longer subjects, Doctor. We are the ones who return." I shut off the tape abruptly. My hands were shaking. That voice wasn't human, and yet I'd swear I'd heard it before. Suddenly I heard a sound upstairs. A door slam. "Emily!" I ran up the stairs. She was in the hallway, pale, her hair tangled, her eyes red. "David," she whispered. "I can't stop him anymore." I approached, grabbing her by the shoulders. "Where is he?" "Everywhere," she said in a trembling voice. "It's not just Daniel anymore." Anderson joined them, all the ones who were revived. Now they are one. I stepped back, horrified. "What did you do, Emily?" She put a hand to her chest. "What you would also do for love." Then something in her face changed. Her pupils dilated, her lips twisted into an unnatural smile, and with a voice that was not hers, she said, "We told you it was your turn." I ran to the bathroom and locked myself in. Through the door I heard footsteps, whispers, banging, and that voice, multiplying, repeating my name over and over. "David, come with us. Be reborn." I covered my ears, trembling, until the noise stopped. When I came out, the house was empty. There was no trace of Emily. Only the echo of those words burned into my head. That night, I turned on the tape one more time. In the last seconds of the video, as the image was fading, a date appeared, June 17th. Tomorrow. And one final sentence, written in red ink. "Last subject pending, David Miller." The name written in red ink stayed in my mind. "Last subject pending, David Miller." That phrase was engraved in my head like an echo that wouldn't let me breathe. It wasn't a threat, it was an announcement. A promise that I would be next in that cursed chain. I didn't turn on any lights that night. I just sat by the window, watching the darkness of the yard. The air smelled like damp earth, and under the faint moonlight I could see something moving among the bushes. First one shadow, then two. A tall figure, and a smaller one, approaching the house slowly. I didn't have to guess who they were. Emily and Daniel. Their silhouettes walked side by side like two lovers straight from hell. I stood up slowly, feeling my blood boil with fear and rage. I wasn't going to run, not this time. I went to the workshop and grabbed a flashlight, an old cross that had belonged to my mother, and a bottle of rubbing alcohol. If they were coming in, I would be waiting. At 3 in the morning, the living room clock stopped. A thick silence took over the house. Then the front door creaked open slowly. A freezing wind swept through the hallway. The candle flame flickered. And there they were. Emily took a step forward. Her skin was pale like wax. Her eyes were no longer her own. Daniel stayed behind her with an expression that mixed sadness and something much worse. "Pity." "Mom," I said, barely a whisper. She smiled weakly. "I'm not just your wife anymore," she replied. "We are many now." I took a step forward. "What do you mean?" "Anderson united us." Her voice sounded distant, as if speaking from a deep well. "We are what's left of the empty bodies. The rejected souls." Daniel approached slowly. "Don't be afraid, Dad. You can come back too." "Back to what?" I shouted. "You're dead." "No," he said with terrifying calm. "We are more alive than ever." His shadow projected onto the floor, stretching until it touched my feet. And then I knew there was no Daniel left. Only the thing that had taken him. Emily held out her hand. "Come with us, David." Anderson tried, but he failed. "With you it will be different." "I will not be a part of this." "You asked for it," she whispered. Every night at our son's grave, you begged to see him one more time. We just listened. Tears suddenly burst from my eyes. I asked to see him. Not to bring hell into my house. Then Daniel spoke, and his voice was no longer his. It was deeper, heavier. Hell didn't come, Father. It was always here, in your desire, in your guilt. He took another step. The floor creaked under his weight. I raised the cross in one hand and the alcohol in the other. Don't take another step. You still believe in that, he mocked. Crosses are for those who fear death. You are already marked. And before I could react, the lights went out. The silence became absolute. I could only hear my own ragged breathing. I turned on the flashlight. Nothing. Emily and Daniel were no longer in front of me. A whisper came from behind me. Dad. I spun around but saw no one. Only the reflection in the hallway mirror. And there they were, all three of them. Emily, Daniel, and behind them a dozen deformed faces, watching me with empty eyes. The glass began to crack from the inside. I hit the mirror with the cross. The glass shattered, and from between the cracks, a frigid breath emerged, as if the air from a cemetery was escaping. Enough! I screamed. But the shadows advanced, covering the walls, climbing the ceiling, approaching like a dark wave. And then I heard something different. A voice I did recognize. Daniel's real voice. Dad, don't let them win. For an instant I thought I saw him. His real face, pale, scared, trapped behind the shadow that dominated him. Son, I whispered, what do I do? Free us. The bottle fell from my hands. I smashed it against the floor, soaked the rag wrapped around the cross, and lit a match. The flame shot up, high and trembling. Emily recoiled. Daniel screamed, a mixture of fury and pain, and the fire began to spread. The shadows dissolved like smoke. Screams filled the house, voices that were not human, coming from everywhere. You can't kill us. We are already part of you. The fire roared, and I just prayed. I prayed with a faith I thought I had lost. The ceiling began to groan, the walls blackened, the mirror burned, reflecting twisting shapes. And among the flames I saw Daniel one last time. His face was once again that of the boy I had raised. He looked at me, tears in his eyes, and said, "Thank you, Dad." The fire engulfed him, and when I tried to get closer, an explosion threw me against the wall. Everything went white. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital. They had found the charred remains of the house. There were no bodies, only ashes. A police officer questioned me, but I didn't know what to say. I told him there was a fire, that my wife and son were inside. Nothing more. They nodded with that look of pity reserved for the insane. But I know what I saw, what I felt. And every night when the wind blows against my window, I hear his voice, distant, almost a sigh. Don't forget what you asked for. Sometimes I wake up sweating, with the feeling that someone is sitting at the foot of my bed, a shadow, motionless, watching me in silence. And when I open my eyes completely, no one is there. But on the nightstand I always find the same phrase, written in ash. Rebirth is not over. I thought the fire had purified everything. I thought that night, among the screams and the smoke, hell had closed forever. But hell isn't put out by fire. It only changes its face. 3 months passed since the fire. I was living in a small rented house by the sea, far from the city, far from everything. The doctor said the wounds on my arm would heal with time, but the ones in my mind, maybe never. I pretended to be better. I smiled, spoke little, slept badly, and every night, before sleeping, I looked at the horizon and murmured, "Daniel, Emily, rest." But peace did not come. One morning I received an envelope under my door. No return address. Inside, a typewritten sheet. Project Rebirth is still active. There is someone continuing it in your name. Below it, an address. Street Helen's Clinical Laboratory. I shouldn't have gone. But I went. The place was in the industrial zone, in a gray, nondescript building. Outside, a sign with new letters. The Anderson Institute. The name pierced me like a needle. The doctor's ghost was still alive, at least in his work. I went in, pretending to be a patient. A drowsy guard barely looked at me. The hallway smelled of disinfectant and silence. A nurse led me to an empty room. On the wall, a poster. Rebirth is not returning from the past. It is conquering death. A chill ran down me. It was the same slogan I saw in the old lab's files. I waited for almost half an hour until a door opened, and then I saw him. A man in his 30s, white coat, rectangular glasses, a calm expression, but his eyes, there was something in his gaze that was unbearably familiar. "Mr. Miller," he said softly, "do you know me? Everyone here knows your story. Without you, this wouldn't exist." I frowned. "Who are you?" "My name is Samuel Anderson, the doctor's son." I froze. "Your father destroyed lives," I said. "My father changed the world," he replied. "The world just isn't ready to understand it yet." He invited me to sit. On the table were folders, photographs, anatomical diagrams. "You were the subject designated 09D, he explained calmly. "My father's last experiment." "That's a lie." "No. Your blood, your DNA, your memory were analyzed when you were in the hospital. You are the final link." I jumped to my feet. "What are you doing here?" "Continuing what your wife started." My throat tightened. "Emily? She believed in the project. Before the fire, she sent us samples, instructions, even part of the original files." The floor seemed to move beneath my feet. "Emily, even in death, she had betrayed me." "It can't be," I murmured. "She died." "No one ever really dies, Mr. Miller," Samuel replied. "Not when we have their genetic code." He opened a folder and showed it to me. Photographs of flasks, test tubes, cells under a microscope. In one of the images, I recognized something that made me stagger. My own signature. This is a forgery." "No. You signed these documents when you were sedated. She did it for you. What do you want from me?" Samuel barely smiled. "Your body. Your mind. The cycle must be completed." I felt a pressure in my chest, a sudden dizziness. It was hard to breathe. I tried to take a step back, but my legs didn't respond. Samuel watched me coldly. "The air, Mr. Miller. Don't try to resist." The invisible gas was filling the room. My vision began to blur. Before I lost consciousness, I heard his voice, soft, almost paternal. "It's all right. You'll be with them again soon." I woke up strapped to a metal gurney. The white light from the ceiling was blinding. To one side, monitors tracked my vital signs, and in front of me, a glass tank filled with a thick liquid. Inside, a body. It was mine. My face. My scars. My motionless body floating in that substance. My heart lurched. "What the hell is this?" I shouted. Samuel approached. "You called it a sin. We call it perfection." "Let me go. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Your wife wanted this to continue. She said it was the only way she would rest." "She's dead." "No," he corrected. "She lives in the system's core. Her consciousness was transferred. She talks to us." He activated a panel. A voice came from the speaker. It was Emily. Soft, melancholic, as if coming from another dimension. "David, don't be afraid. We'll be together again soon." My eyes filled with tears. What did they do to you, Emily? What had to be done? There is no death, only change. Accept your place. I tried to break free. The straps cut into my skin. Emily kept talking, her voice merging with the hum of the machines. He is waiting for you, my love. Daniel needs you. Samuel adjusted a knob. The liquid in the tank began to bubble. My body, my copy, my reflection, opened its eyes. They were black. Completely black. Panic flooded me. Samuel turned to me with scientific serenity. Don't worry. This will only take a moment. The monitor began to beep. The copy moved its lips, and in my own voice it said, "Are you ready to be reborn, Dad?" With a desperate effort, I managed to free one hand. I grabbed an instrument from the floor, a pair of metal shears, and cut the other straps. I jumped off the gurney, stumbling, dazed. Emily screamed from the speakers. "Don't do it, David. He is you. That's exactly why," I yelled. I smashed the control panel. The lights flickered. Alarms began to sound. The tank cracked. The liquid spilled out. The copy thrashed violently, trying to get out. Before it could, I threw a chair at the glass. The container shattered. The body fell to the floor, inert, drenched. The silence was absolute. Only my trembling breath filled the room. Samuel looked at me, horrified. "What have you done?" "I've put an end to your damn project." I ran for the exit. Before I crossed the door, I heard Emily's voice one last time, now distorted. "David, you are still marked. You can't destroy what you already are." When I got back to the car, the sky was beginning to lighten. I looked at my hands. They had dark stains, tiny threads of that liquid. I tried to clean them, but the color wouldn't come off. When I started the engine, the car radio turned on by itself, and a familiar voice, my voice, said calmly, "We'll see each other soon." The drive back was a nightmare. Every shadow on the road seemed to move. Every reflection in the glass showed me a face that wasn't entirely mine. The sound of the engine blurred with my ragged breathing. I tried to convince myself it was all over, that the lab had burned down after I fled, that the body, my replica, had been destroyed. But deep down I knew nothing ended that night. Emily was right. I was marked. When I arrived at the cabin by the sea, the sky was already dark. I opened the door and the smell of dampness hit me. The silence was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of the waves. I lit a candle and set it on the table. The flame flickered, as if the air refused to stay still. I went to the bathroom to wash my hands. The dark liquid from the incident still stained my skin. But when I turned on the faucet, the water came out cloudy, red. I backed away, sickened. Then I saw it. My reflection in the mirror blinked, except I hadn't. The reflection smiled. "You can't separate yourself from me anymore, Dad." My heart leaped. "You're not real. I wasn't the first time. But I am now." I punched the mirror, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. The reflection multiplied, thousands of little me's staring back from every fragment, and they all laughed at the same time. I staggered out of the bathroom, breathing hard. In the living room, the candle had gone out on its own. I turned on my phone's flashlight, and the light illuminated something on the wall. "Rebirth ends tonight." The letters were made of soot. They were still smoking. And underneath, drawn with a trembling hand, was a symbol I recognized from the lab. A circle with a spiral in the center. My chest began to hurt, an internal burning as if something was beating under my skin, wanting out. I tore open my shirt. On my sternum, where there was nothing before, the same spiral was slowly appearing. Not painted. Branded. I fell to my knees. The pain doubled me over. I felt my heart beating to a different rhythm, faster, deeper, as if something inside me was trying to take over the tempo. Then I heard Emily's voice. Not from a memory, but from inside my head. Don't fight it, David. It's useless. We are part of you now. Get out of my mind, I screamed. No, we came to stay. All of us. Thousands of whispers mingled, bodiless voices echoing in my skull like a swarm. I covered my ears, but they were still there, repeating the same thing. Rebirth, rebirth, rebirth. I ran to the door, but it wouldn't open. The doorknob was cold, sticky, as if dried blood was on the metal. I pushed hard. Nothing. The whole house seemed to be breathing down on me. The walls shuddered. The floorboards creaked. Suddenly, a gust of wind swept the room, and the lit candles, I didn't remember lighting them, began to melt in unison. The flames formed a circle of fire on the floor, and inside it the air rippled as if something invisible was trying to materialize. No, I whispered. Not again. The figure emerged slowly, tall, hunched, its face hidden by shadows. But its voice was mine. Did you think you could escape, David? I backed up until I hit the wall. The heat from the fire was growing. The smoke blurred my vision. You're not real, I repeated, though I wasn't sure anymore. No. But neither are you. It took a step toward me. The floor vibrated, and for the first time I understood the truth. I hadn't destroyed my copy. I was the copy. The real David had died in that lab, when Samuel knocked me out. The man who had fled was the result of the experiment. With my memories, my voice, my pain, an empty body filled with the residue of something else. The figure smiled. Now you understand. I felt a rush of heat up my arm. The brand on my chest glowed like a red-hot iron. Emily's voice returned, sweet and terrible. Complete the cycle, my love. The fire will set you free. The house was shaking. The flames spread across the floor, climbing the curtains, enveloping the walls like a living tongue. The smoke burned my lungs. And in the chaos I heard Daniel. Dad, end it all. I crawled to the kitchen. I had stored a can of kerosene. I opened it with bloody hands and poured it on the floor. The fire roared to life like a beast. The figure approached, slow and relentless. You think you can destroy what you are? It said in my voice. You can't burn your own shadow. No, I answered, with a sliver of air. But I can burn with it. I lifted the burning lamp and threw it to the ground. The explosion was immediate. The fire engulfed me, bright, all-consuming. I screamed, but not in fear anymore. It was rage, pain, redemption. The voices merged into one, screaming with me, until the sound was lost in the roar of the flames. I don't know how much time passed. When I opened my eyes, the roof was gone. Above me, a black, starless sky. The house was a smoking skeleton. The fire still burned in the circle, but it didn't hurt anymore. In front of me, 3 figures. Emily, Daniel, and myself. All 3 were smiling. It's over now, Emily said. There is no death, Dad, Daniel added. Only rebirth. The darkness enveloped me. They say when the body burns, the soul is set free. But sometimes, what comes out of the fire isn't a soul. When the firefighters arrived, the cabin was already a charred skeleton. The beams were still burning, lighting the dawn with a sad orange glow. Among the ruins, they found only one body, lying near the center of what was once the living room. The face was indistinguishable, but a melted chain hanging from the neck helped identify him. David Miller. The report was quick, bureaucratic, cold. Accidental fire. Victim found deceased. No other remains were found. No one asked any more questions. No one searched any further. But the fire hadn't destroyed everything. 3 days later, in a rural hospital 20 miles away, a man was admitted by a fisherman. He found him floating near the shore, naked, covered in ash. He was breathing, but he didn't remember his name. When he woke up, the first thing he said was, "I don't know who I am." The doctor called him the man from the fire. His skin was marked by burns, but his eyes, those gray, deep eyes, looked as if they had seen things no human should see. He didn't talk much. He just stared out the window, watching the smoke that still rose on the horizon. "He must have been lucky," the nurse commented. "Or something else," the doctor replied, unable to explain why the patient's heart was beating with two different rhythms. "Week's best." The man began to recover, physically at least. The doctors tried to help him remember his past. They showed him objects, photographs, single words. One day a nurse came in with a blackened cross that the firefighters had found in the cabin's remains. As soon as he saw it, the man shuddered. His eyes clouded over. "Do you recognize it?" she asked. He took it in his hands. The metal still smelled like smoke. "Fire?" he murmured. "Rebirth." The nurse stepped back, uncomfortable. That word didn't appear in any report. But ever since the patient said it, strange things began to happen. The hallway lights flickered when he was awake. The heart monitors changed rhythm, as if synchronizing with his breathing. And sometimes, when he slept, he talked. Low, fragmented whispers. "We are not one. We are many." One night, the nurse on duty saw him standing in front of the bathroom mirror. His eyes were open, but he seemed asleep. His reflection didn't move the same way. As he tilted his head to one side, his reflection smiled. The woman screamed. He woke up with a jolt. He didn't remember anything. The next day, the doctors decided to transfer him to a psychiatric center in the capital. But he never arrived. The ambulance was found abandoned on a coastal road. The driver was alive, though in a state of shock. He only managed to say one sentence. He stood up and walked away into the flames. Meanwhile, in the city, a minor news item went unnoticed. The Anderson Institute had been reopened under a different name. No one knew who was funding the project, but the employees were the same. A new nurse named Laura wrote an internal report weeks later. "I met the new director today. He has a look that is familiar. He says his name is David Miller, but according to the records, that man died in a fire." David, if that's who he still was, walked the halls of the Institute with a calm stride. The staff respected him, feared him, but no one knew where he came from or how he had gotten there. He spent hours in front of a large circular tank filled with translucent liquid. Inside floated three bodies: a man, a woman, and a young man, his wife, his son, and himself. He spoke to them in a low voice, as if they could hear him. "You can rest now," he would say. But the fire was only the beginning. Around him, monitors showed vital signs. The three bodies breathed slowly. One of the technicians swore he saw the young man open his eyes for a second, but when he mentioned it, David smiled. "Sometimes the soul takes time to adjust," he replied. That night in his office, he wrote in a black-covered notebook. The last pages of Daniel's diary, rescued from the fire, were taped inside. Below, he added his own note. "Fire does not destroy. It purifies. What burned in me was not flesh, but a boundary. Now I understand, son. Death is not an end. It is a door, and I have already crossed." He closed the notebook and left it on the desk. On the cover, he wrote a single word in red ink: "Rebirth." Then he turned off the lights and headed to the main laboratory. The liquid in the tanks began to bubble. Emily moved her fingers. Daniel smiled under the water, and David's voice, serene and multiple, filled the room. "Welcome back, family." At dawn, Residents of the industrial district reported a slight vibration, like a tremor. No one was alarmed. But on the coast, the sea began to boil for a few seconds, and hundreds of dead fish floated to the surface. That same afternoon, a child playing on the beach found a charred black bottle washed ashore by the tide. Inside, a note. The barely legible letters said, "The flame is still alive. They say fire purifies, that nothing survives its embrace. But fire doesn't destroy memory. It only transforms it." I woke up in darkness. No pain, no time. A slow pulse ran through my body, as if something was reminding me how to breathe. I didn't know where I was, or who I was. Only a voice, distant but known, repeated in my mind. Rebirth is not over. I opened my eyes. I was in a white, silent room surrounded by tubes, cables, and screens. The air smelled of metal and disinfectant. My body wasn't exactly mine. There were new scars in impossible places, and when I touched my chest, I felt the branded spiral still hot. Hours passed, or days, I don't know, before someone came in. A young man, white coat, round glasses, and an almost unnatural calm. "Good morning, Mr. Miller." His voice chilled my blood. "Samuel?" I asked. "Samuel died in the fire. I'm Daniel." It couldn't be. Daniel was dead. Daniel had burned before my eyes, but there he was, standing, breathing, with the same light in his eyes. Although behind that gaze, there was something else. Something that didn't belong to my son. "You still don't understand, do you?" he said, smiling sadly. "I'm not just Daniel. What are you then?" "I am the echo." He walked toward me and showed me a lit tablet. On the screen, a log from Project Rebirth. Diagrams, dates, lab images. My name was at the top of every document, and at the bottom of each, a signature identical to mine. "You finished the job, Father," Daniel said. "Or at least, a part of you did." "That's a lie. I destroyed everything." "You destroyed the fire, but not the seed." He leaned in, facing me. "You copied all of us. Mom, me, even yourself. That can't be." "Yes, it can," he replied calmly. "Because you wanted it. Because you couldn't stand to lose." His words hit me like knives. I remembered the days of weeping by Daniel's grave. The nights I begged God to see him one more time. Maybe I had wanted it. Maybe I had opened the door without knowing. Daniel kept talking. Project Rebirth wasn't created to defeat death. It was created to erase it. Erase it? Yes. When a body dies, its consciousness leaves traces, vibrations, an echo. Anderson discovered how to trap it, how to amplify it. He paused and smiled. "And you perfected it." My throat went dry. "What did you do to me?" "I gave you back what you wanted. An eternal family." He showed me another screen. On it, live images of 3 tanks filled with translucent liquid. Inside floated Emily, Daniel, and a third body. Me. I shot up, the cables ripping from my skin. "That's not me." "It is you," he repeated, "but without limits. You are the perfect template." "And what are you?" I asked, trembling. "I am what's left when memories mix with guilt, the sun and the creator." I tried to run for the door, but the floor began to vibrate. The lights flickered. Bubbles rose from the tanks. Then cracks. The liquid began to overflow, cascading onto the floor. Emily opened her eyes inside her tank. Her gaze was pure calm. "David, it's time." Daniel held out a hand. "Don't fight anymore, Father." The entire room filled with a deep hum, as if the air itself was breathing. My vision blurred. The world was dissolving. Suddenly, everything went silent. I woke up in a place I didn't know. There were no walls, no floor, no sky. Only a golden light and a voice that echoed from all directions. What have you done, David? Who's speaking? We are what you called rebirth. I don't understand. You gave us life, but not a purpose. You created us to fill your emptiness. Now, we are that emptiness. An invisible wind passed through me. I felt every memory, every tear, every guilt multiplying. And among it all, Daniel's laughter. Look at me, Father. We are no longer two. His silhouette appeared before me. His face was mine, younger, cleaner, but his eyes were empty. We are one. I tried to back away, but I no longer had a body, only consciousness. And then I understood the fire hadn't destroyed my soul. It had transferred it. I was part of the system. Rebirth had won. The lights flickered like a beating heart. The voice returned, now inside me. Your wish was to see them again. Your punishment is to see them forever. I saw Emily's face, beautiful and sad, repeating a phrase like a prayer. Rebirth isn't living again. It's being unable to ever die. Daniel smiled. And you, Dad, you will never get to rest. Why? I whispered. Because you were the final experiment. What experiment? The shared soul. Everything began to fade. Emily and Daniel disappeared in flashes of light. My voice mixed with theirs. Millions of echoes repeating the same thing. An endless chorus. Rebirth, rebirth, rebirth. And in the last instant, before the darkness swallowed me, I understood the true horror. There was no more death, no more heaven, only us, recreated, repeated, eternal. In a physical place somewhere, an old computer turned on its monitors. One screen showed a simple message. Project Rebirth. Status. Active. Main unit. D. Miller. Synchronization complete. The machine emitted a low hum. A voice emerged from the speaker. Deep, serene, human. I am David Miller. And this time, there is no escape. Before you go, tell me in the comments what you thought of this story. Do you think David really died, or that rebirth is still going on? I want to read your theory. And if you like this story full of mystery, pain, and redemption, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and tell me what city you're listening from. Your support keeps this flame alive, the one that never goes out. I am David Miller, and this was my story, or at least the part you remember.